New York City, 1946. The war is over, but in a small, cramped office at Brooklyn College, another kind of battle is being waged. It's a quiet war, fought not with armies, but with ink, paper, and relentless intellect. The room smells of aging books, stale cigarette smoke, and the sharp, acidic scent of fresh ink. This is the sanctuary and the prison of Alice Kober, a professor of classics. She hunches over a makeshift desk, a converted dining table, which is completely submerged beneath an archipelago of index cards. There are thousands of them, meticulously organized in repurposed cigarette cartons. Each card, no larger than a postcard, is a universe of its own. On it, Kober has hand-drawn, with the precision of an artist and the discipline of a scientist, the bewildering symbols of Linear B, an undeciphered script from a long-dead Aegean civilization, the Mycenaeans. This is the language of the heroes of the Trojan War, a world that vanished 3,000 years ago, leaving behind only these cryptic, unreadable clay tablets. She wasn't hired for this. Her official duties were to teach Latin and Greek to undergraduates, to grade papers on Virgil and Homer. This obsessive quest was her own, a self-funded after-hours crusade. The academic establishment, a rigid patriarchy centered in the hallowed halls of Harvard and Oxford, saw this kind of work as a fool's errand. For 50 years, the greatest male minds in archaeology and philology had thrown themselves against this wall of silence and failed. The script was a ghost. There was no Rosetta Stone, no bilingual key to unlock its secrets. There were just lists, inventories of chariots, tripods, and personnel, etched into wet clay and then accidentally fired into permanence when the palaces that housed them burned to the ground. To her male colleagues, Kober's project was seen not as ambitious scholarship, but as a peculiar hobby, the kind of painstaking, detail-oriented task they patronizingly labeled women's work. They saw her as an archivist, a glorified illustrator, hired to draw ruins and categorize curiosities. They failed to see the revolutionary analytical engine powering her work. Every single night, after a full day of teaching, Kober would sit at this table and continue her monumental task. She was building a database from scratch long before computers would make such a thing trivial. She would take a single sign from a photograph of a tablet and create a card for it. She would note its position in a word, the signs that came before and after it, and the tablet it came from. She had over 180,000 of these cards, each a testament to a patience that bordered on the sublime. This was not mere cataloging. This was an interrogation. She was hunting for patterns, for the subtle statistical ghosts that haunt any language. She believed that even without knowing the meaning of a single word, the structure of the language could be forced to reveal itself. The system was designed to be her external brain, a paper machine for processing a dead language. She worked in near total isolation, a solitary scholar in a field that prized collaboration among its chosen few. The war had cut off communication with European scholars, and even within the American academic scene, she was an outsider, a woman at a public college with no access to the grants and resources of the Ivy League. Yet, fueled by an unshakable conviction, she persisted. She believed the code wasn't unbreakable, it was just waiting for the right key, the right method. As the city lights flickered on outside her window, illuminating a world rebuilding itself from the ashes of conflict, Alice Kober was trying to resurrect a world that had turned to dust millennia ago. How could she, a single classicist armed with only index cards and an unyielding will, succeed where an entire generation of celebrated men had failed? Following that tireless dedication, Kober's ocean of index cards began to yield its secrets. The meticulous drawing of the script was never the end goal. It was the foundation for a profound analytical leap. She wasn't just copying symbols. She was dissecting them, mapping their relationships, and forcing the raw data to confess its underlying logic. By the late 1940s, after years of this painstaking comparison, she made a discovery that would fundamentally alter the course of the decipherment. She identified what are now known as Kober's triplets. These were groups of 3 distinct words that were clearly related. They shared a common root of 2 symbols but had a different third symbol. To understand the genius of this, imagine you don't speak English and you see the words runner, running, and runners. Without knowing what they mean, you could deduce that run is the core concept and the endings ing, and ers are grammatical variations, inflections that change the word's function. This was precisely what Kober did for Linear B. She proved, through sheer statistical force, that the language was inflected, like Latin or Greek, where word endings changed to denote gender, number, and case. This single insight ruled out the popular theory that the language was something like Chinese, where each symbol represents a whole word. The resistance to this idea was immense. The leading theory, championed by the influential archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans, was that the language of this Minoan civilization was some unique non-Indo-European tongue. Kober's evidence flew in the face of dogma, but her evidence was irrefutable. From this discovery emerged her next brilliant innovation, the grid. She began to organize the symbols not by their appearance, but by their suspected phonetic relationships. She created a grid where columns represented a consonant sound and rows represented a vowel sound. For example, if she suspected one symbol represented the sound ka and another ki, she would place them in the same column but in different rows. She didn't know what the sounds were, but she knew, based on the patterns in her triplets, that they shared a consonant. This was a scientific dissection of an unknown linguistic structure, a way of mapping a ghost language's phonetics before a single word had been read. Her findings were published in obscure, self-funded academic journals, articles she paid for out of her own meager professor's salary. While her male colleagues at more prestigious institutions had access to university presses and ample funding, Kober was mailing out her mimeographed research to a handful of scholars, hoping someone would see the importance of her work. Her correspondence, now preserved in university archives, is a testament to this struggle. Letters to Sir John Myers, a key figure in the field, show her patiently explaining her methodology, her logic sharp, and her evidence overwhelming, even as she battled his ingrained skepticism. She was building the intellectual scaffold, piece by meticulous piece, that would be necessary for any final decipherment. She had laid the girders and poured the concrete. She had established the rules of the language's grammar and the relationships between its sounds. The structure was sound, the foundation was unshakable, built on a mountain of empirical evidence. But she was running out of time. A heavy smoker and relentless worker, her health was beginning to fail. The very dedication that fueled her breakthrough was consuming her. The question was no longer if the script could be broken, but who would be the one to finally stand upon her meticulously constructed foundation and place the final stone. Building on that crucial scaffold, the answer arrived with a broadcast on BBC Radio in July 1952. A young English architect and amateur linguist named Michael Ventris announced to the world that he had deciphered Linear B. He declared, stunning the academic community, that the language of the tablets was not some lost Minoan tongue, but in fact a very early, archaic form of Greek. It was a watershed moment in archaeology, pushing back the history of the Greek language by half a millennium. The world celebrated Ventris as a lone, brilliant genius who had solved the puzzle that stumped the professionals. Ventris's announcement made him an international star. But behind the headlines and the applause, a quieter, more complicated truth resided. Ventris's great leap was not made in a vacuum. It was made from the shoulders of a giant whose name was barely mentioned. Alice Kober had died tragically of lung cancer in 1950, just 2 years before Ventris's announcement, at the age of 43. She never saw the final validation of her life's work. Ventris, who had corresponded with Kober, built his final breakthrough directly upon her foundational discoveries. The grid he used to assign phonetic values to the signs was a direct evolution of Kober's grid.
His ability to test for Greek as the underlying language was entirely dependent on Kober's triplets, the very evidence of an inflected language that she had fought so hard to prove. His own work notes, the detailed log of his decipherment process, are filled with references to her articles and methods. He had her blueprint. He saw the structure she had revealed and, with his own flash of insight, realized which language fit that structure. The system, once again, had found its hero, a charismatic, well-spoken man who fit the popular narrative of solitary genius. Kober, the quiet, methodical woman from Brooklyn College who had laid the entire groundwork, became a footnote. Her posthumous papers, a vast collection of her 180,000 index cards, notes, and letters, were eventually archived at the University of Texas at Austin. Examining them is a profound and heartbreaking experience. You can see the evidence, card by card, of the years of labor, the intellectual dead ends, and the final brilliant breakthroughs. It is the work of a first-rate mind systematically dismantling a problem piece by piece. The injustice is not that Ventris received credit. His contribution was real and significant. The injustice is that Kober's indispensable role was almost completely erased from the popular story. Her name vanished from the citations, her foundational work presented as a mere preliminary step rather than the essential key that made the final turn possible. This erasure is a textbook case of how history is written, by elevating the final, visible achievement over the slow, foundational labor that enables it, a pattern that has disproportionately affected women and marginalized thinkers throughout scientific history. It forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question. How many other intellectual architects remain uncredited, their blueprints used to build monuments that now bear other names?